This is where we keep tortoises in the interim prior to adoptions. Whether they're found or injured, depending on the capacity of the injury, they're kept here. If they have to be kept in a sterile environment, then they are kept indoors for a temporary means. Animal control and Animal Foundation do not take in desert tortoises, and they pretty much all get filtered in through Tortoise Group. On rare occasions, we do have wild tortoises that are hit by cars or different situations where they can't be returned to the wild, and those ones will also be kept here typically. The main reason why we don't release tortoises back out into the wild and why it's illegal is the main concern is disease. And upper respiratory infections are really common with captive tortoises, but we also see it in the wild population as well, but it is more prevalent in captivity. The desert tortoise is listed under the Endangered Species Act as far back as 1990. Essentially, people were grandfathered in to keep them as pets that already had them as pets, as well as their offspring. They're not allowed to cross state lines. They can't be released back out into the wild. They can't be taken from the wild, and they can't be sold or traded or bought. There are still pretty high fines if you get caught taking a desert tortoise out of the desert. They're listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act, but as far as an actual number, most people are pretty standoffish to actually give a number of how many are left in the wild.
Is there reasons or factors that have caused them to be threatened?
So the main factor would probably be human development. There are other factors as far as predation, disease. There's very big common misconceptions, and it is really contradicting because we have a bunch in captivity, but these tortoises can't be utilized as a recovery means to the wild population. So we treat them as two separate populations. These are all Mojave Desert tortoises, so they are native to the Mojave Desert. They get to be about 10 to 13 inches in shell length. Occasionally, on a very rare occasion, we'll have a couple monsters come through. We usually have 2 or 3 that are 15, 16 inches in shell length. That's not normal for wild tortoises at all. That's probably because they were fed a really high protein diet. We've heard of tortoises that have been fed dog food, and then essentially you have a tortoise on steroids. They are very opportunistic eaters. They'll eat a lot of things. Desert tortoises are herbivores, so in the wild they eat mostly cacti, desert wildflowers, and annual grasses. So that's what we try to imitate when we're giving them a captive diet as well. Common misconceptions are fruits and vegetables. Most people, I mean, you'll see millions of pictures of tortoises eating strawberries all over the internet, and while it's very, very cute, it's definitely not the best thing for them. A female can have anywhere from 1 to 14 eggs in a clutch and up to 3 clutches in a year. So you can go from having 2 tortoises to having 36 in one season. Another fun thing about the desert tortoise is females can store sperm in their systems. So even if you separate your mating pair, a female can produce viable eggs for several years. We have had females that have had eggs or laid eggs in people's yards that have adopted. We ask that they don't incubate those eggs. We're already pretty inundated with captive tortoises as it is, and those babies can't be used for recovery at this point, so they're not really doing any means to help conservation efforts. We don't see pyramiding with wild tortoises. That doesn't happen. They have nice smooth shells. It only happens with captive tortoises that were probably raised indoors. Pyramiding is when the plates on the shell are raised up, so you'll see some tortoises in our habitat that have bumpy shells, and that's what we refer to as pyramiding. The main component of a desert tortoise habitat is, one, you need a backyard because they do need to live outdoors. The person would be required to build a burrow because that's the most important aspect where tortoises go to escape the extreme temperatures. We ask that people plant edible plants for the tortoise to graze and browse. Make sure that their yard is escape-proof because these guys are really good at escaping yards, and a little water dish. Because all desert tortoises are still considered wildlife, they belong to the people of Nevada. So when you adopt a tortoise, you're not actually an owner, you're a custodian or a keeper of the tortoise. and they can live to be 80 to 100 years in captivity, so it's definitely a long-term commitment, and we do see people that surrender tortoises because they're essentially can no longer take care of their tortoise and they want to make sure that it's going to a good home before they go on.